look into what is a changing world that we farm and we grow food in. Now, our consumers are becoming more aware of production systems, and they want their food and fashion grown and produced in a manner that is sensitive to people, profit, and the environment. I'm your host, Sarah Perriam, and alongside the Global HQ family of journalists and analysts, that is the largest rural newsroom in New Zealand, Aotearoa, New Zealand. We bring you Sarah's Country, and it's the opportunity to connect with the latest knowledge and opportunities because they are everywhere, just waiting for the open-minded. We celebrate opinion on the Opinion Maker Show and those that are bold enough to have one, especially if it is selflessly to progress a value proposition for more than just themselves. And in your weekly Opinion Maker Show, we certainly cover off that as a large group of New Zealand farmers have been doing it extremely tough in 2020. Whilst commodity prices in many parts of the industry remained pretty stable, the venison industry took a 6-year dive in farm gate prices, nearly halving due to the position they found themselves in with closed restaurants in the Northern Hemisphere. Everything can seem difficult if you choose to look through it with those lenses, though. And one thing we do try to do here on Sarah's Country is provide a place of optimism and of hope. And of course, one industry that I have watched in admiration for so many years that has the ability to continue to keeping on is the New Zealand deer industry. Now, from its humble pioneering beginnings in the 70s, when we were one of the very first countries to capture and farm deer, we've become so respected around the world, from South Korea and their love of our velvet for its health properties, to Germany and their discerning chefs and their passion for our farm-raised grass-fed venison. But COVID-19 created a massive headwind for venison, as well as velvet in its logistics to market, along with a rise of domestic environmental regulations coming into play. It has been, and we acknowledge again, a very tough time for New Zealand deer farmers. However, over the next hour, we're going to highlight some collaborations and strategic partnerships that will be key to improving these prices and opportunities for our deer farmers. Over the next hour, an in-depth insight into what has been an enduring year for deer in 2020, behind and beyond the farm gate. And this is all thanks to the work of Farmers Weekly journalist Annette Scott's recent articles, which you can read at farmersweekly.co.nz. From Deer Industry New Zealand, a venison marketer, a deer farmer, we're going to learn throughout the Opinion Maker Show how the deer industry plans to capture value into the future in what is a changing world and climate. Farm gate prices, as I said, have slipped to a 6-year low, but the volumes were up. Silver Fern Farms Group Marketing Manager Nicola Johnston will explain what the impact of COVID-19 was on venison prices from Europe and North America, but how they have pivoted in their efforts into venison's third largest market, China, in a venison marketing project with Deer Industry New Zealand. To close the show, on our panel discussion, we have Deer Farmers Association Executive Committee member Mark McCoard and Deer Industry New Zealand's Environment Project Manager Phil McKenzie. I'm going to unpack with these gentlemen just around how challenging it is on farm for deer farmers at the moment. However, with the rate of change, there becomes opportunity as well. How will we implement such large changes, and particularly to meet climate change emission reduction targets? Mr. McCoard and Phil McKenzie will discuss with us about how deer animals in our farming systems could become more efficient to produce more from less. But to kick off, Deer Industry New Zealand's Velvet Marketing Manager, Rhys Griffiths, will unpack with us a collaborative effort between 3 companies that are marketing deer velvet antlers into Asia, and how they've formed a coalition to go in with critical mass to develop New Zealand's velvet market as a health food ingredient in China. All that up next here on Sarah's Country.
This is Sarah's Country, produced in alliance with Farmers Weekly, the place New Zealand farmers turn to for a trusted source of in-depth agricultural journalism. Stay connected to the matters that matter most by subscribing to My Daily Digest at farmersweekly.co.nz.
Oh, nice boots.
Yeah, thanks. They're new.
Ben, you alright?
Oh, yeah, sorry, mate. Just meerkatting pretty hard, eh? Yeah. I just said to myself, Ben, you work hard. You deserve new boots.
Well, deer velvet and red ginseng, two of the highly prized ingredients in traditional oriental medicine, have in recent years enjoyed an explosion in demand from South Korea for use in branded natural health products to combat fatigue and boost immunity. Now, the top-selling velvet-based product in Korea is used for busy executives to give them an energy boost and a clear focus at work, and also athletes are using velvet to aid with their recovery following intense exercise. An absolute miracle product. But whilst Korea has had a love affair with the health ingredient, replicating the same demand in China has had its hurdles, and our major trading partner have introduced strict food safety laws in recent years. But New Zealand is one of only two velvet producing countries that can comply with these. So that's good news. There has been a coalition of 3 New Zealand companies marketing deer velvet antlers in Asia, and critical mass is needed to make an impact into this crucial market as a proposed new health food. Joining us to discuss this is Deer Industry New Zealand's Velvet Marketing Manager, Rhys Griffiths. Thank you so much, Rhys. It has been a trying year, and we will, get into that a little bit later, but more so highlighting and celebrating this particular opportunity. How will a coalition work within competition laws and be of benefit to these companies' sales, but also have a wider benefit from marketing-wise into China?
Thank you very much, and thanks heaps for asking me along to join with you tonight in the conversation. We're really excited by the China Velvet Coalition, the partners that have come to us, to Deer Industry New Zealand, to assist them in their goals of setting up a coalition approach to the Chinese market. It is important to understand that doesn't change kind of what happens here in New Zealand. They'll still be competing in terms of how they procure their velvet, and also to how they'll sell their velvet in China. But it does give them a voice in terms of being able to go and connect with those large Chinese food companies in the same way that we've done in South Korea, and seen that significant success that you've touched on just now. So we know that with our close relationship with South Korea, with the large food company KGC, that their hard work in terms of promoting New Zealand velvet to consumers really paid off. So we want to try and find key food partners that can do the same in China. You also touched on the fact that New Zealand, which is quite awesome, is only one of a couple of countries that can actually export velvet to China. Australia being the other, and only a couple of exporters have got the ability to be able to export. As far as we're aware, Russia can still not export velvet to China. Now, the pathway that's allowed us to do that is something called the RCS, so the Regulatory Control Scheme, that a lot of our farmers went through a lot of hard work back from November 2017 when this regulation was implemented. So that's been a real positive for the industry, and given us that great market access. So we've gone through, made sure that the regulatory pathway is good and clear into the market. What we need to do now is to support companies, commercial companies, that really want to try and engage with those big companies in China in the same way we've done in South Korea. Now, if one or two or three of these big commercial companies start producing and marketing New Zealand velvet products, so these are products that are compounded with other ingredients like red ginseng, but often they'll promote the New Zealandness of the velvet that's contained. We know that if it follows a similar pathway to South Korea, we know that other companies will follow suit, and so it means that there will be a trickle-down effect right throughout the industry. As of today, there are something like 39 companies in South Korea, and they don't all just work with those top bigger three exporters that are in this velvet coalition. They work with many of our other exporters. So we will see this effect happen, and opportunity being picked up by other players in the market.
In China, it's been traditionally in medicine. However, these recent changes have allowed velvet to be regarded as a food product in China. That has great significance.
Yeah, it does. So the TCM, the traditional Chinese medicine route, was the same that we were going through in South Korea for many, many years, probably for about 30 years. Over the kind of, say, traditional Oriental medicine, through the Oriental medicine clinic. And about 10 years ago, we found a nice pathway into that healthy food market. So we can see that pathway in with China. So in China, it's consumed often as a kind of an agricultural type product, so as a basic TCM type ingredient, or sold through the Oriental medicine doctored channels. We don't necessarily think that's the ideal pathway. It's a good pathway for us, but it gives us little opportunity to differentiate ourselves and to provide some kind of backstory around how we produce velvet in New Zealand here. So we know that New Zealand malu, or New Zealand red deer, is able to be used as an ingredient in health functional foods in China. So that provides us that good, clear pathway into that healthy food market, which we think will give us a closer connection with the consumers by working with the big health food companies.
How do we retain our intellectual property as New Zealand velvet in such a large market if we are still selling velvet over into a commodity to be produced in China and market?
Yeah, so I mean, you've hit the nail on the head here, Sarah, and that's one of the driveways to get away from this commodity traditional medicine market, where once you take velvet up to the market, it gets dried and gets sliced. It's really hard to differentiate it. Once companies start really promoting the New Zealandness of their velvet, then they are really tied into that New Zealand brand, that New Zealand origin. There are tools out there. There's a great company based in Dunedin actually called Oratane, and they've got fingerprint markers around kind of country of origin verification services and what have you. So there are some pretty neat and sophisticated tools out there to be able to provide proof of origin, and we've been working with Oratane and other organisations as well along that side of things. But actually, if we can link in with these big food companies and they see the benefit of promoting New Zealand velvet, that's a real tie-in to us and our brand and our intellectual property.
And when it comes to these particular laws that China has strictly put on that New Zealand is able to supply, as you said, also Australia, would you be able to talk us through what the MPI administered regulated control scheme involves? Because it's quite detailed.
It is. It was a fantastic document and a big thumbs up for MPI working. So as our regulator and as the people with a close connection, I guess, to the Chinese regulators, they work really closely with their Chinese counterparts, and they work really closely with industry to make sure that the document gave some surety to our overseas markets, but was also achievable out on farm. So the RCS, or the Regulated Control Scheme, kind of provides for three key areas. The first one being around hygiene. We've got to make sure that sheds are hygienically managed. So there's a nice list of what to do around that. We've got to make sure that velvet is treated under strictest kind of cold chain management. So there's some good visibility around that. So velvet's got to be placed into a freezer within 2 hours of removal. There are other declarations around making sure that that velvet meets its food safety, no residues and what have you. But there is this traceability function as well, which, as you're probably aware, we're about to launch this new program called ValTrack, which will just be that final lid on, I guess, on the whole RCS movement that we've seen such success and gained, such success into the markets, and not just China, but also into South Korea, as the big food companies really look to gain more confidence about our handling of New Zealand velvet and its food safety.
Yeah, I've just been doing some reading into the velvet traceability, and it's very cool in terms of embedding an RFID chip within the velvet to ensure, as opposed to, I suppose, the old-fashioned just whack a tag around it, to ensure that traceability. So congratulations to everybody that has been involved. Rhys, as we see the price of velvet increase, we're seeing the price of stags with the highest price this year, 56,000 for a velvet stag. As more may choose to want to enter into, how does the likes of Deer Industry New Zealand ensure that the extension to farmers on things like the strict welfare code and how to meet our markets' expectations is rolled out across New Zealand?
So I'll just go back and clarify a point there, if that's okay.
Yeah,
the RFID chip is actually embedded into the new wristband type tags. So we've gone away from the old cable ties, which were breaking, and we're having tremendous problems with. New wristband tags give us a chance to also promote New Zealand, promote our kind of sub brand, as it were. But the chip is actually embedded in the wristband. In the wristband tag that goes on. It is good to see confidence. So prices actually did ease this year, unfortunately, but it's a really uncertain world, and we read the market when we were coming into the season as still being very buoyant at the consumer end, which has definitely played out. But there would be a problem in terms of getting product up to the market. And we had this conversation, I think, at the early part of the season, where I think you challenged if there's consumer demand there, why could prices fall? We've actually seen this play out. We've seen some problem areas around getting product up to the market with issues around shipping, and that has played out a bit, and it's consequently lead to prices falling. But most of what I'm hearing from people out there is that we have had some good certainty in the market this year. So velvet really traded very, very strongly. Demand was there, even though there were problems getting up. And that's, I guess, led to a continued confidence in the velvet industry. Now, you bring up a really good point. How can we ensure that new people coming into the industry can meet the standards? And that's, I guess, part of this whole ValTrack and the whole RCS point of view. So when a farmer gets into velveting, they need to make sure that they're working with their local veterinarian. Their local veterinarian is the first part in their whole chain in terms of making sure that they can then get onto the NVSB, National Velvet Standards Body, and they can go through the correct training procedure, and then keep that updated every year. As you may be aware, it's fully auditable as well. So there are some really good, robust systems in place with the National Velvet Standards Body.
Fantastic. And Rhys, an outlook for the year ahead, where's your crystal ball?
Wow, it's still really early days. Look, we've got, COVID-19, I think we're in a better year this year than we certainly saw last year, but there are still headwinds. There still are some headwinds out there in terms of what's, the whole global movement side of things. But, vaccines, they're starting to play off. We're starting to see, COVID rates dipping down, and I think this will really play quite positively for velvet. We've finished pretty well in terms of moving product through. Velvet sits in a good, unique position. You've seen anti-fatigue and immune function are the two key areas it's used. It's not a bad place to be right now. So I'm optimistic about the velvet sector particularly, and I think that as vaccination plays out, and I know you're catching up with Nicola after me, and I think that should hopefully be looking for a brighter future for venison once we can get past the kind of COVID year that is ahead of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Rhys Griffiths, Velvet Marketing Manager for Deer Industry New Zealand. And as Rhys pointed out there, coming up in Sarah's Country, we're going to be joined by Group Marketing Manager for Silver Fern Farms, Nicola Johnston, as we turn now to venison and what a year it has been for prices, regardless of volumes of trade. However, with COVID disrupting sales in its premium markets and vaccination rollout looking positive for food service, New Zealand's venison market has its eyes on the prize, which is China. Nicola will explain the group marketing project with Deer Industry New Zealand into China next.
This is Sarah's Country. Catch the latest on the matters that matter most wherever you are. Listen to Sarah's Country on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple or Google Podcasts. Try asking Alexa or Siri. Play Sarah's Country on podcast.
COVID has severely disrupted sales of premium venison cuts, normally sold to high-end restaurants in Northern Europe and North America. And many, of course, we know have closed their restaurant doors and operating at greatly reduced capacity. It's dropped the New Zealand venison price to a 6-year low. If you're watching, you'll be able to see a venison farm gate price graph there just to see how far it has fallen and returned to farmers down 30%. There's been export volumes up though in 2020 to 11,781 tonnes. But these lower prices. But there's positive news. And China is now New Zealand's third largest market for venison by value and volume. And so Silver Fern Farms have joined forces with Deer Industry New Zealand to develop a venison marketing project. Joining us to discuss more is Group Marketing Manager for Silver Fern Farms, Nicola Johnston. Nicola, it has been an enduring year for venison. However, very positive news with the venison marketing project in China. Can you please explain about the contestable fund and how Silver Fern Farms has been chosen through that review panel?
Sure can. Hi, Sarah. Look, it has been a really tough year in the venison industry, and it's been a particularly tough year for our customers globally, particularly in food service channels, as you've mentioned. We've worked really closely here at Silver Fern Farms with our farmers to try and get our arms around them and be pretty transparent about that. On the way through. What is particularly exciting is that DINZ recognised that there was going to need to be some significant work done in the market to try and diversify the role that venison plays in those markets and the channels that we use to bring that product to market. So each of the processors in the deer industry was invited to put forward an application about where we might see opportunity to reposition venison into different channels and into different and particularly I think bringing the innovation practice to bear on how we do that. And so we're delighted that DINZ has selected our project into China as part of that.
Now, we've just been speaking to Rhys Griffiths, and there has been a coalition to have critical mass in China. How come do you believe, as opposed to all of our processors of venison in New Zealand not coming together to do the same?
Look, I think that as New Zealand's largest red meat producer, we've got a role to play here at Silver Fern Farms to take a leadership role for the sector. And I think why DINZ has selected our project is that I think we can do a lot of the groundwork that will then benefit some of the other processors as they start to open up some of those channels and opportunities. And I think the project that we've put forward to DINZ this year specifically is around China and how we open up that market. It moves beyond just gathering insight, which I think we've done as an industry to understand the role that venison currently does play in some of the barriers. But what is new for this project is that we're actually taking an ethnographic approach, which is where we go into people's homes, we go into consumers' homes, we go into chefs' restaurants, and we really try and use a human-centred design approach to overcoming those barriers. And I think that will make a difference then in terms of how we truly co-create new products to take to venison to consumers and take venison forward in a new way. And I think that will benefit the whole sector.
Yeah, and what work have Silver Fern Farms done in the way of new product development and consumer insights within the home and other product categories such as beef and lamb that you will take in your learnings to venison?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, Sarah. We learn from our basket or portfolio approach, to be honest. With venison, it is a really unfamiliar protein to Chinese consumers, and so that means there's an even greater innovation effort required to adapt it into formats that they understand or at least can consume. We have. There's three different tranches, I guess, to our project. As we've gone into people's homes and studied their behaviour and then broken down those barriers and tried to overcome them. Same in kitchens with chefs. We're seeing opportunities in three different areas. One, in the food service channel to really actively target the hot pot market, where we've been quite successful with lamb in particular, getting lamb into different formats that work within a hot pot context, and there's a very large sector there that if we could crack for venison it would be fantastic. The other one is more consumer focused, and how do we actively encourage trial of venison, and we're looking at some quite specific new social media channels, whether it be Douyin or TikTok, in China, where we've got the chance to actually use key opinion leaders or influencers to really sell the story of New Zealand venison and actually break down people's perceptions and some of those barriers and teach them how to cook and how to use venison. And the third is actually, really getting closer to venison's application within the pet food sector and the high-end premium end of that market. And all three of those streams of work we're doing in partnership with some of our customers and market, where we will truly use those insights and design principles to embed and co-create new products for that market.
Whether there's a challenge with Chinese perception of deer still being a wild animal as opposed to our farmed production systems of deer, but at the same time, Chinese, if you crack that health element, venison's a winner.
Absolutely. And look, there's some preconceptions that do exist that are challenging for us. The Wild Game Association that you raise is key to that. So obviously the story of how our animals are farmed, raised, free range, but not a wild animal. That's going to be a really, really important part of that story. Equally, the Chinese medicine or TCM approach is a bit of a double-edged sword. Where consumers do understand that venison has some very nourishing and nurturing qualities under that, we need to be able to transition away from a barrier which says it's actually a very strong meat. You have to actually have quite a hearty constitution to be able to stomach venison. It's particularly warming, it's good for kidneys, and some of that sort of thing. So there's reasons to lean in to the health aspect of TCM, but also reasons to set ourselves away and really position venison as a very healthy, lean, nourishing, light, delicate kind of protein.
Very interesting there, because it's a very valid point when their culture is so connected to traditional Oriental medicine, as we heard, of course, earlier with Rhys Griffiths as well. With these venison prices hitting a 6-year low, how is the general sentiment within, deer farmers investing in genetics, not getting out of hinds, and also encouraging them that, the tables can turn, not just China, but of course in our other markets as well in the year ahead?
Yeah, look, I think deer farmers should take heart. It's not something that we can solve overnight, but certainly here at Silver Fern Farms, we're actively working on how we pivot venison into new formats, whether it be in China, but also in the US, where we've been able to successfully work through some new opportunities to bring venison ground products to market via e-commerce, via key retailers. So those sorts of opportunities and those projects are going well. We are seeing positive consumer reception to venison as a protein in those channels. It's just a big job to do, and it won't happen overnight.
Before you go, Nicola, I just want to give you a big round of applause for this latest Mind Food magazine. Huge. Opening in the front page, Honest Burger, all the new packaging for New Zealand. Silver Fern Farms raised burger patties. The packaging's incredible. Well done to you and your team. It's awesome work.
Oh, thanks so much, Sarah. And, that's a really good example of how we're trying to bring venison to market in new ways for people to enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely. It gets people talking, and that's for sure. Thank you so much, Nicola Johnston, the Group Marketing Manager for Silver Fern Farms. And, of course, all of these stories in the Opinion Maker show have been kindly pulled together by Annette Scott from Farmers Weekly, and you can have a read at farmersweekly.co.nz. To round out the show, we go to our panel. We've got Deer Farmers Association Executive Committee member Mark McCoard and Deer Industry New Zealand's Environment Project Manager Phil McKenzie. I want to unpack some of the key points from Rhys and Nicola and how deer farmers are feeling on the ground, but really get into how they're also feeling about how they will achieve climate change emission reduction targets and the environmental challenges that deer present.
This is Sarah's Country. Join the conversation. Have thoughts on an interview? Or have you got questions you want answered by a future guest? Let us know. Email sarah@sarahscountry.com.
Well, there's a headline message for livestock farmers here in New Zealand that if our Climate Change Commission's recommendations are to be adopted, they'll see a reduction in net methane emissions from the agricultural sector from 2018 levels by 13% to 2030, a further 7% to 2035, and another 4% to 2050. Deer farmers are going to be looking to implement some novel intervention if they will achieve climate change emission reduction targets such as this. However, there is a lot of work that has been underway in the deer industry for quite some time in this space. But how do deer farmers in New Zealand produce more from less? They are only one of the many red meat sector groups that are certainly trying to achieve that. Joining us now to discuss the future on farm and our farming systems around deer is Deer Farmers Association Executive Committee member Mark McCoard and Deer Industry New Zealand's Environment Project Manager Phil McKenzie. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time to come on Sarah's Country today.
Thanks, Sarah.
Now, Mark, I understand that you have a role to play in Hawaka Eka Noa, the primary industries group that talks with the climate minister and works through these recommendations. What's it been like in your advisory role, and what are you hearing?
We're only partway through the process, but at this stage, I'm one of a number of people from the farming industry or deer farmers that are working with the government panel, attempting to get workable solutions for the deer industry, as all other livestock classes are too. Probably a lot of what is being discussed is quite broad and relevant to the other industries as well. But that is probably the key thing from a deer farmer's point of view. We need tools in the toolbox to help meet the emissions that have been stated to be we're attempting to achieve.
Phil, I mean, the challenge it will be, of course, for all livestock farmers in New Zealand to be able to produce more from less. For those who aren't familiar with how deer farming operates in a New Zealand environment, could you give us a bit more context from a farm management perspective?
Yeah, so deer operate across all the land systems that we've got in the country, so and often integrated with sheep, beef and deer, so it's very much a combined approach. There are extensive deer systems. Generally, they are more lightly stocked and more widely spread, in amongst often a lot of woody vegetation and bush. So that is the opportunity to offset that would be really advantageous. But other than that, very similar approach to the other industries, and it's been a really good demonstration of the power of the Hawok Economic Partnership, that we've been able to get together as industries and talk about these things together and how we're approaching them and what tools we can use and the approaches that will win the day for us.
Mark, when it comes to wider connected ecosystem challenges that we have, fresh water management, for example, and tying in with, of course, our climate change emission targets, there's a lot of pressure on deer farmers at the moment, but this isn't new to the deer industry. How are deer farmers, been implementing good, positive environmental on-farm management?
Well, good farm or environmental management hasn't been a new thing for the deer industry. They've been very, very proactive in this area for a long time, probably since its inception. And they brought out a land care manual a number of years ago. That's since been replaced by an environmental stewardship manual. So they have been very proactive in ensuring, good on-farm stewardship. So they are continually moving that area. It's not something that's just a recent undertaking. So you've got the riparian plantings, waterway fencing, and probably more key, because deer farming is integrated, as Phil said earlier, with other livestock classes. It gives you the opportunity to have the right animal at the right place at the right time when implemented with the other classes of stock. So that is quite an important tool as well.
I was actually driving past a mob of deer the other day, Phil, and I pointed out that they were all very grey looking, and because of the nature of deer deer as an animal wallowing in mud. How do, as Mark just said, you do have the right animal for the right paddocks and that wider management system with sheep and beef, when there is those different sort of animal behaviour ways that deer can affect the environment?
Yeah, I think wallowing is a natural behaviour for deer, and you can't always dictate where they're going to wallow. But one of the powers I've seen of deer farmers working together in small groups, like an environment group or an advanced party, is that generally someone in the group will have had an example where they've been able to shift a wallow from close to a sensitive waterway or connected to a waterway into the middle of a paddock where the deer can wallow happily and they're not causing any harm to the environment. So just being able to see those examples and learn the tips and tricks that others have already applied is really valuable, and for farmers to gain that understanding and awareness that these are the things we can do, and they will really have an effect, is quite powerful. And to see practical examples, there's nothing like seeing how another farmer's approached it to know that that's what I could do on my farm. So yeah, those are really, really strong examples.
Mark, highlighting on the advanced parties, there is the Passion to Profit initiative that's been underway for some time. What have you seen come out of these action groups and this peer-to-peer learning amongst deer farmers?
It's very, very much farmers learning from farmers, and it's in the early stages, it really dragged on-farm performance up from production, just simply by changing some management practices. So it's been really, really valuable, because obviously farmers learn from other farmers more readily than probably any other source. And more in recent times, it seems to have evolved away from that focus and more into some of the areas that Phil just touched on, with the environment and on-farm practices that can be done in mitigating and sort of meeting the standards that are required in that area. But it just comes back to the same base thing, that farmers learning from farmers and seeing practical examples that they can use is by far being the most the fastest way of getting the message across. Print obviously is valuable for some, but yeah, those practical examples are invaluable.
Phil, what's the feedback from farmers on how to navigate all of this uncertainty and change at the moment? What are they telling you?
Well, farmers are human like everyone else, so you get the whole range of points around the discussion, and you have to sort of tease out everyone's ideas and let people have a bit of a vent if they need to for a while. And then often it gets down to the practical examples of what are we going to do about it. So I just find that conversations, and when you can have them in a focused way, really help people to move to navigate change. And change has been the one constant of farming through the years, since forever. So it's not that farmers don't know how to change. They have changed systems a lot over the years. They will change. They know how to do it. They often just need to know the why. Why are we having to do this, rather than you must do this. So once they understand the why, like the rest of us, they will figure out a solution to how to make that happen.
Mark, we've heard from Rhys Griffiths and, of course, Nicola Johnston earlier on our markets and our market access to support that why. But a lot of the times it comes down to the how, when, those profit margins aren't there to be able to put that back on farm. Could you paint for us a bit of a picture of what it's been like over the last 12 months with such a slide, and particularly in venison prices, for progress environmentally to continue?
Yeah, it has been a very, very challenging year, particularly for the venison industry. The whole market got turned on its head through COVID, where the restaurant and hospitality trade just dried up overnight, which was the main market for venison. So there's had to be a fast repositioning, and that's still in play. So hopefully will sort of insulate us well into the future. But from a velvet perspective, that's held well. I think the immune stimulating properties of velvet in the markets in Asia are still highly regarded. So it's been less affected, but it has still had an impact with higher transportation costs. And so it has still been affected, but in a lot less way. It's like anything, for environmental change to happen, it requires time to change, and it requires financial support to change. And if your operating margins on farm are getting squeezed, which is particularly the case for venison farmers, then you've got to pay the bills first, and to survive on farm before you can instigate some of the change that is looking to be achieved. So profitable businesses can instigate environmental change far more successfully than the ones that aren't.
And Phil, in your role with Deer Industry New Zealand, and that conversation that you're having at a government level around these particular policies, do you believe this current government understand the challenges of achieving exactly what Mark just said?
I think they do understand them, and actually a plug for the programs like the Passion to Profit program. That is a really strong partnership with MPI and the government. And, there are a lot of things that get covered in that program that are of real value to New Zealand as well as to farmers. And I think that's recognised. And I think the government appreciates that there are challenges, and they appreciate that farmers need time to do it, but there are things that need to change. So mechanisms that help us all understand that are really quite valuable. But yes, I think they do understand farming.
Mark, what's the messages you're getting from your association members, your deer farmers, around how they are feeling in terms of the rhetoric that's coming out of government, the rate of change that is expected of them all at once with so many different policy updates? I mean, it's a very overwhelming time for them.
Yes, it is. Yeah, I think you've pretty well covered it there. It's not so much the change. The change is a constant, but it's the rate of change and the amount of change in so many areas that are quite overwhelming. A lot of people that have entered into the farming careers, particularly the ones that are at the older end of the spectrum, the skill sets and challenges that they're now facing are not what they started farming for. But they've evolved over a number of years and met those requirements, but it's the rate of change is what's doing the most damage. And as I mentioned before, you've got to be financially profitable in order to be able to meet some of the requirements that have been asked of us. And first and foremost, if we're not profitable, it's going to be very difficult.
Phil, how are you feeling about the year ahead and how far we've come and how far we've got to go?
I'm feeling really positive about the year ahead because I think there is we've got vaccine rolling out now. I think September, October, the chilled season for venison next year is going to be a lot better than the chilled season last year. So I'm optimistic on that point. Mark's absolutely right. The rate of change is here and around us, and it's happening. We need to find ways of adapting to that because that's universal across all of us, really. And we just during the next year, we have got Passion to Profit. The P2P brand is really strong now, and we're looking to how do we springboard that into something we can really grow even more over the next few years. So we're going to be running some consultation with farmers and all the stakeholders as to how we can really strengthen that brand and bring even more farmers in, but also deepen the topics and the areas we talk about as well. So really lots happening and good positive stuff from my point of view.
Mark, from your point of view?
And just to add to what Phil just said there, a lot of what's being done behind the scenes to support farmers is going to be invaluable. As I mentioned before, a lot of farmers joined or started their farming careers for love of the land and the animals, and now there's a whole lot of different requirements that they don't have an understanding of. So the support of those programs to help them through it will be critical.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for taking the time to be on our Opinion Maker panel today. Deer Farmer Association Executive Committee member Mark McCoard and Deer Industry New Zealand's Environment Project Manager Phil McKenzie. Well, that's all we've got time for on the Opinion Maker Show. If you are enjoying these shows and you'd like us to cover a particular issue or theme, I love hearing from our audience. So send me an email, sarah@sarahscountry.com, and we'll look at pursuing that, as well as if you do want to get something off your chest, can I suggest sending in a pulpit, which is an opinion article, to brian.gibson@globalhq.co.nz, and it may be featured in Farmers Weekly. So our Opinion Maker shows are usually based from there, and we formulate all sides of what is happening around that particular theme. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this show in its entirety, either live from 7 p.m. on Tuesdays at sarahscountry.com, where you can also listen to a live audio stream on the website, as well as, of course, to our growing audience on podcast. Now, tomorrow we have our very popular Changemaker show. We have a smart, sustainable and sassy show. There's a game-changing smart pivot, irrigation pivot that is, developed by fielding-based software engineers that will be able to monitor more than just variable water application. It will be able to monitor crop health and even fix itself. Zimatics Technology Strategy Advisor Stu Bradbury will join us to explain. And this week's Farmers Weekly's on-farm story is Honest Wolf Sophie Hurley, who will join us to explain herself and her husband Sam's Papanui Station journey in going from handpiece to handbag. There is a sustainable beef patty trial that has been of great success thanks to the New Zealand Roundtable for Sustainable Beef. But how sustainable is it? Grant Bunting has more. And plant and food research scientist Kerry Templeton will outline the new hop cultivars that are chasing those unique flavours in that very popular premium craft beer market exploding worldwide. All that up on the Wednesday's Changemaker of Sarah's Country. In the meantime, take care of yourself. Ka kite anō.